To the one who was never meant to find this, welcome back. You were never supposed to hear these words, not according to the system, not according to the ones who worked overtime to keep you distracted and disconnected from yourself. From the very beginning, they didn't just want to silence your voice, they wanted to erase your signal. They weren't afraid of your noise, they were afraid of your knowing, because even before you remembered who you were, they could feel it, your depth, your frequency, your potential to shake the foundations of everything they built on illusion. They tried to bury you, not in dirt, but in doubt, in noise, in comparison. They handed you confusion and called it truth. They gave you betrayal and called it your fault. They masked manipulation as mentorship, rejection as fate, fear as wisdom. And they hoped that if they repeated those stories long enough, you'd forget your own. But you didn't, not fully, because here you are, still watching, still listening, still remembering. Before we go any further, let me say this from my heart. Thank you. To those of you who have supported this message through super thanks, your generosity helps this light reach farther and shine longer, and I'm deeply grateful. But whether you donate or not, your presence here already means everything. Just by being here, by choosing to watch, by choosing to awaken, you've already changed the frequency of this space, and that matters. So if this message is already stirring something inside you, drop a 999 in the comments, hit like, and help send this out into the algorithm. Not for fame, not for trend, but as a signal to the others, because when more chosen ones wake up, the system starts to crumble faster. YouTube's algorithm responds to movement, to momentum, to energy, and your energy might be the one that wakes up someone else's soul. You weren't overlooked. You were hidden for protection. You weren't delayed. You were being positioned. You weren't rejected. You were rerouted. Because your path was never meant to follow the crowd. When the universe chooses someone, it doesn't give them comfort. It gives them pressure, fire, isolation. Not as punishment, but as preparation. You weren't shaped on stages. You were shaped in silence. And that's exactly why you carry something that can't be copied. They thought your breakdown was the end, but it was your beginning. They mistook your isolation for weakness, but it was your realignment. They thought you forgot, but deep down, a part of you always knew. Now, something in you is rising again. You can feel it, can't you? That pressure in your chest, that subtle remembering, that quiet voice whispering, this message was meant for me. And you're right, it was. This isn't just a video, it's a mirror. And the person you're starting to see again, the one you were before the programming, before the pain, before the silence, that person is real. That person is coming back online. And that's exactly what they feared all along. So breathe. Settle into the truth that's been waiting for you beneath all the lies. You were never broken. You were never late. You were never weak. You were just distracted. But now, the remembering has begun. Let's begin. God's chosen ones, you weren't supposed to see this. And now they're terrified. Number one. They weren't fighting you, they were fighting what sent you. Have you ever paused and asked yourself, why does everything seem so intense around me, even when I try to stay quiet? Why do people react so strongly to your presence, even before you speak? The truth, chosen one, is this. They weren't fighting you, they were fighting the divine force that sent you. What if every attack on your life wasn't a coincidence, but a reaction to a frequency you didn't even know you carried? They thought they were silencing just one person. But, in trying to stop you, they picked a fight with the universe itself. And here's what they didn't count on. The universe never loses its own. You weren't their enemy, but you were their alarm. You didn't threaten them with words, but with energy. What if your mere existence was the codebreaker in a system built on sleep? Could that explain the resistance you've faced your whole life? John 15:19 tells us, "If you were of the world would love you as its own. But because you are not of the world hates you." They felt it long before you did. And so they came for you, not because you were weak, but because something ancient had already claimed you. They couldn't name it, but they felt the tremor in the spiritual realm every time you came close to remembering who you were. Have you ever felt like your struggles began before you could even form a thought about yourself? Like chaos surrounded you before you had a chance to dream? That's no accident. Your enemies saw the glow before you saw your reflection. And while you were still trying to understand why people betrayed you, abandoned you, or mocked you, they were reacting to something they couldn't contain. Look at history. Harriet Tubman was hunted not for escaping, but for freeing others. Martin Luther didn't spark the Reformation because he wanted attention. He exposed a corrupt system with the boldness of someone who had heard something true. Alan Turing, the brilliant mind behind breaking Nazi codes, wasn't feared because he failed. He was erased because he succeeded in ways they didn't understand. What do all these people have in common with you? They didn't just survive darkness, they disrupted it. Jeremiah 1:5 declares, "Before I formed you in the womb I knew you. Before you were born I set you apart. I appointed you as a prophet to the nations." That appointment came without approval from this world. The moment you were sent, the war began. And yet, you're still standing. Why? Because the fire didn't destroy you, it revealed you. And deep down, haven't you always known there was more to you than what you were told? So why did betrayal sting so deeply? Why did isolation become a pattern? Why did people turn on you when all you offered was love? Because this wasn't punishment, it was positioning. What if everything that broke your heart was actually preparing your spirit? What if every rejection was divine redirection? Romans 8:28 reminds us, "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose." The chosen are not shielded from pain, they are refined through it. That pain shaped you, sharpened you, and awakened you. And now you're no longer just reacting, you're remembering. And what is it that you're remembering? That you were never ordinary, that you were never created to fit in, that the fire wasn't your end, it was your beginning. Just like Corrie ten Boom, who smuggled hope into the darkest places and proved that faith is louder than fear. Or James Baldwin, who wielded truth like a sword through his words and refused to let silence become safety. And even when they were attacked, erased or misunderstood, their frequency kept vibrating, just like yours is beginning to. Isaiah 54:17 boldly states, "No weapon that is formed against thee shall prosper, and every tongue that shall rise against thee in judgment thou shalt condemn." So when they gossiped, they lost power. When they tried to bury you, they didn't know you were a seed. You were never made to be manageable. You were made to be miraculous. Still wondering if this message is really for you? Still doubting whether the battle you've faced is connected to your calling? Then ask yourself this: why would the enemy invest so much energy in destroying someone who posed no threat? Why did the attacks come before the confidence? Why was your childhood soaked in confusion while others lived in comfort? Because the system knew something you were never supposed to find out, that once you remember, their hold on you dies. This is not just a personal awakening, it's a cosmic correction. And now, every illusion is trembling under the weight of your truth. Do you feel it? Ephesians 6:12 gives clarity, "For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world." The fight was never just physical, it was spiritual. And now that you're stepping into awareness, their fear is justified. You are the glitch in their matrix. You are the code they can't rewrite, the force they cannot cage. So let them call you too intense, too sensitive, too bold. That's just their language for, we don't know how to control this. Let them discredit your journey. It no longer defines you. Because now you've stopped apologizing for existing. Now you've stopped dimming your light for comfort. And every time you rise, you remind them that their era is ending. Still questioning if this really applies to you? Let this be the final word. They didn't attack you because you were weak. They came for you because you were chosen. And now that you've begun to remember, it's too late for them to undo it. You didn't arrive at this message by mistake. You were summoned to it. The illusion is cracking, the truth is awakening, and you, chosen one, are no longer just walking through life, you are rewriting it. Number 2. You doubted your light, and that was their only win. Chosen one, have you ever stopped to ask, when did I first begin to dim my own light? Who planted the seed that made you second-guess the very brilliance that was meant to set you apart? This wasn't just random insecurity. This was a strategy, a quiet war waged in the shadows, not to destroy your light, but to convince you to switch it off yourself. And for a time, it worked. But not because you were weak, because you were never supposed to doubt your own power in the first place. They couldn't extinguish your flame, so they convinced you to fear its heat. They couldn't silence your truth, so they manipulated your perception. Can you see it now? That every time you apologized for being too intense, every time you hid your gifts to make others feel comfortable, every time you questioned your intuition, it wasn't humility, it was programming. You were taught to believe that shrinking made you safer, but all it did was make you forget who you are. Galatians 5:1 reminds us, it is for freedom that Christ has set us free. Stand firm then, and do not let yourselves be burdened again by a yoke of slavery. They couldn't enslave your soul, so they enslaved your mind. They tricked you into thinking that taming your fire was maturity, when in reality it was self-erasure. What if the very parts of you that have been criticized most harshly, your depth, your sensitivity, your boldness, were always your divine tools? Think about this. Frida Kahlo, known for painting her pain into powerful self-portraits, was told she was too raw, too emotional. James Cameron, the filmmaker behind Titanic and Avatar, was constantly ridiculed for being too visionary. And Zora Neale Hurston, the groundbreaking author of Their Eyes Were Watching God, was once shunned by her peers for writing a truth too deep for her time. What did they all have in common? Their greatness was only ever too much for those living too little. And you are cut from the same radiant cloth. So ask yourself, who taught you to dim your joy to make others feel secure? Who told you your gifts were flaws? Who benefited when you started doubting your design? These weren't innocent moments. They were spiritual attempts to cage something divine. And it worked, only because you believed the distortion. Matthew 5:14-15 declares, "You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. You were never made to blend in. You were never meant to ask for permission to shine, but they surrounded you with those who couldn't see your worth, hoping you'd forget it yourself. They gave you a mirror designed to distort, so you'd see flaws instead of fire. That mirror was a lie. Your doubt was never organic. It was engineered. You weren't broken. You were built with layers most people can't even comprehend. You weren't overthinking. You were decoding energy. You weren't too sensitive. You were emotionally tuned to frequencies that make others uncomfortable. Do you realize how powerful that is? 2 Timothy 1:7 reminds us, "For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind." The fear you've carried wasn't yours. It was injected into you. Every ounce of self-doubt was planted by those who feared what would happen if you ever fully believed in yourself. That wasn't love. It was manipulation dressed as mentorship. That wasn't advice. It was fear disguised as wisdom. And now that you're starting to remember, they're nervous. Because once a chosen one reclaims their light, they don't just shine, they set fires. They wake others, they shift rooms, they dismantle systems. And suddenly the same ones who told you to tone it down will ask how you became so fearless. But by then, chosen one, it'll be too late. 1 Peter 2:9 declares boldly, "But you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession, that you may declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his wonderful light." You were chosen not to survive in the shadows, but to lead others into the light. Your journey through doubt wasn't a detour, it was part of the assignment. Because now you know what it feels like to be lost. And now you know how to lead others back to their own truth. So when they say you're too much, too deep, too intense, translate that as, "We're not ready for this level of realness." When they call you unstable, realize they're just trying to protect the system your energy is disrupting. You weren't designed to be palatable. You weren't crafted to be contained. You are a force that was never meant to be explained. You were meant to be felt. And if you're still carrying guilt for being who you are, let it go now. Guilt is the residue of programming that never served your soul. You are not a burden. You are the breakthrough. You are not too much. You are exactly enough to shatter ceilings. You were never the problem. You were the proof that the old way is done. The matrix only works if you forget who you are. The prison only holds power if you never try the door. And the illusion only wins if you believe your light is dangerous instead of divine. But now you remember. And now they've lost the only weapon that ever worked, your self-doubt. Let them scramble to rebuild the illusion. Let them call your awakening rebellion. Let them try to redefine you using the language of fear. It doesn't touch you anymore. You're not walking in hesitation. You're walking in divine clarity. You're not dimming to make others comfortable. You're burning bright enough to light the path for those still lost. So take back your light. Take back your fire. Because the moment you stop doubting and start standing, the world changes around you. Number 3, your isolation wasn't rejection, it was calibration. Chosen one, have you ever wondered why the loneliest seasons of your life felt the heaviest? Why in the moments when you needed others most, they disappeared like shadows at sunrise? Why doors closed, voices went silent, and connection seemed to dissolve into thin air? Was it really abandonment? Or was it alignment in disguise? You thought you were being rejected, but what if the universe was simply clearing the static so you could finally hear the original signal buried within you? Could it be that your isolation wasn't punishment, but precision? You weren't being left behind, you were being moved ahead. And what looked like silence was actually sacred space. Psalm 34:18 tells us, "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit." In those quiet places where it seemed like no one saw you, heaven was drawing near. The noise was removed, not because you weren't worthy of attention, but because your spirit was too valuable to be diluted by distraction. You weren't lonely, you were being tuned. You weren't abandoned, you were being upgraded. And yes, at first it hurt. How could it not? Everything inside you had been conditioned to equate attention with worth. But chosen ones aren't trained through applause. We're refined in silence. Have you noticed that your most transformative moments didn't happen in crowds, but in stillness, when no one else was clapping, but something inside you was awakening? When you weren't being celebrated, but you were being stripped down to your truth. Why? Because your destiny doesn't require an audience. It requires alignment. Let's look at those who walked this path before you. Emily Dickinson, the brilliant poet, spent most of her life in solitude. Her genius wasn't validated in her lifetime, but her isolation gave birth to words that would ripple through generations. Isaac Newton, during the plague, went into isolation and emerged with the laws of gravity and motion, revelations that changed the world. And Jean-Michel Basquiat, the visionary artist, was often misunderstood, dismissed and isolated by the very culture he disrupted. But his work became a mirror that still reflects uncomfortable truths. You see the pattern, don't you? Hebrews 11:38 refers to God's chosen ones as those of whom the world was not worthy. You weren't hidden because you were lacking. You were hidden because the world wasn't yet ready for what you carried. Isolation is how God guards his rarest creations. You were never meant to blend in with the background noise. You were meant to cut through it. And that's why you were removed from environments that couldn't hear your frequency. They didn't recognize your power because it didn't sound like their echo. They couldn't feel your energy because it cracked the comfort zones they worshipped. You weren't rejected, you were preserved. Still wondering why those friendships faded. Why people ghosted you when you needed clarity the most. Why you couldn't seem to hold on to communities that felt safe. Ask yourself this: were they truly supporting you? Or were they taming you? Were they celebrating your light? Or dimming it to keep their own shadows unexposed? The universe knew, and so it cleared the room. Isaiah 30:15 reminds us, "In quietness and trust is your strength." It was never in the noise that you would be restored. It was in the stillness. That stillness wasn't empty. It was full of coding, full of downloads, full of recalibration. You were never being ignored. You were being instructed. And you're not the only one who's walked this road. Bob Marley spent much of his creative process in solitude, writing lyrics that carried prophetic power. Mother Teresa admitted to experiencing long seasons of spiritual silence, where God's voice felt distant, but those very seasons birthed a depth of compassion that the world still remembers. And Vincent van Gogh, though misunderstood and unappreciated in his lifetime, painted in silence what the world would one day call brilliance. So if you're still in a season of solitude, good. Stay there. Let it do its holy work. Let it strip away every false identity, every role you were forced to play, every belief that says you must be surrounded to be significant. Because when you come out of this, you won't return seeking connection. You'll radiate such clarity that connection will seek you. Romans 5:3-4 teaches, "We rejoice in our sufferings, knowing that suffering produces endurance, and endurance produces character, and character produces hope." Your isolation isn't dead space, it's divine soil. That ache in your chest, it's expansion. That silence around you, it's the echo of destiny making room. So stop mourning the ones who couldn't walk with you. They weren't meant to. Their ears weren't tuned to your frequency. Their hearts couldn't hold the weight of your calling. Let them go without resentment, because when you rise, you won't need to prove anything. You'll simply be, and the power of your being will be undeniable. This isn't rejection. This is your refinement. This is your preparation. This is your initiation. Let the silence continue. Let the room remain empty if it must. Because what's being birthed in your solitude is a version of you that no crowd could ever produce. And when you return, chosen one, it won't be to blend in. It will be to lead. Number 4. They couldn't handle your vibration, so they tried to bury it in distractions. Chosen one, have you ever truly considered why your life has felt like a long series of interruptions? Why peace always seems to be just out of reach, disrupted by chaos that feels oddly strategic? Could it be that this pattern isn't accidental? That the distractions weren't random, but orchestrated to scatter your sacred energy? They couldn't destroy you, so they diverted you. not with weapons you could see, but with emotional fog, overwhelming noise, and carefully designed confusion. Every chaotic friendship, every roller coaster relationship, every opportunity that led nowhere. Those were distractions, not obstacles to test you, but strategies to misdirect you from your assignment. Why? Because when a chosen one aligns with clarity, they become unstoppable. 1 Corinthians 14:33 reminds us, "For God is not the author of confusion, but of peace." So tell me, who benefits when your life feels like non-stop confusion? Who profits when you're constantly drained, running on fumes, unable to hear your intuition through the static? It was never just about tiring your body. It was about exhausting your spirit so you'd forget who you are. And if you're honest with yourself, haven't you felt it? That deep inner knowing that you're meant for more, but you've been too distracted to act on it. The system knew they couldn't handle your vibration, so they came for your focus. Because your attention is spiritual currency, and every minute spent on something meaningless is a withdrawal from your soul's wealth. You weren't lazy, you were buried. You weren't unmotivated, you were misdirected. They didn't need to chain your body, just hijack your mind. Because if you ever got still enough to reconnect to your divine signal, everything false would collapse under the weight of your clarity. Look around. Simone Biles, the greatest gymnast of our time, shocked the world when she stepped away from the Olympics to prioritize her mental health. That single decision rippled through culture. Why? Because the world had been feeding on her performance, not honoring her presence. Her clarity disrupted a global illusion. Or take Emily Bronte, who wrote from isolation, uncelebrated in her time, but whose truth now echoes centuries later. Or Bob Dylan, who disappeared from the spotlight again and again, only to return with music that shaped generations. Their power didn't come from constant output. It came from intentional retreat, from choosing focus over performance, purpose over noise. Ecclesiastes 4:6 says, "Better one handful with tranquility than two handfuls with toil and chasing after the wind." And yet, how many times were you told that rest is laziness, that burnout is noble, that staying busy is the price of success? That's not wisdom, that's programming. That's how the system keeps chosen ones running in circles instead of rising in stillness. But don't be fooled. This war was never waged against your potential. It was waged against your focus. Because the moment you stop leaking energy into people who don't pour back, when you stop letting everyone else's urgency become your emergency, when you stop reacting and start aligning, that's when the shift happens. Proverbs 4:25-27 commands, "Let your eyes look straight ahead. Fix your gaze directly before you. Do not turn to the right or the left. Keep your foot from evil." You were designed to move with purpose, not with panic. To carry sacred fire, not scatter it into distractions that can't even hold your light. But the system banks on your forgetfulness. It floods you with stimulation, with digital noise, with guilt trips and emotional bait, hoping you'll stay so busy that you never notice your own divine clarity slipping away. But here's the truth they didn't want you to discover. A focused, chosen one is their greatest threat. Not because you're violent, but because you're vibrant. Not because you destroy, but because you expose. When your energy is no longer split between 1,000 things that don't matter, you become magnetic. Systems built on fear and manipulation begin to tremble. 2 Thessalonians 3:3 affirms, "But the Lord is faithful, and he will strengthen you and protect you from the evil one." You are not unprotected, but your protection is partnered with purpose. You must choose to guard your energy like gold, because every time you say yes to distraction, you're saying no to destiny. Every minute spent chasing validation is a minute not spent walking in your calling. So now, chosen one, let me ask you, will you keep reacting to the noise, or will you finally retreat to the stillness? Will you keep letting the external world pull you out of your internal wisdom? Or will you silence the static and listen to the voice that's been whispering your truth all along? The distractions won't stop. The chaos will keep knocking. The old patterns will try to lure you back into comfort. But now you know what's really at stake. You weren't meant to live in a whirlwind of emergencies. You were meant to move with clarity, with presence, with power. Let the urgency fade. Let the guilt dissolve. Let the chaos collapse under the weight of your awareness. Because they never feared your noise. They feared your focus. And now that you see through the illusion, now that you're waking up to the truth, they're losing their grip. They tried to bury your vibration. But you're not staying buried. You're breaking through. And when your energy is no longer scattered, when your focus becomes your sword, the world won't just notice your light, it will be changed by it. Number 5. Your pain was programmed, not personal. Chosen one. Have you ever asked yourself why the pain came so early, before you even had a name for it? Why did betrayal, abandonment, and emotional chaos find you before you were old enough to protect yourself? Why did the storm seem to know your address before you even knew your identity? That's not coincidence, that's programming. And the sooner you realize it wasn't personal, it was strategic, the sooner you take your power back. They hit you early on purpose. Your pain was engineered to keep you fragmented. You weren't just unlucky, you were targeted. And the goal was never to destroy you completely, but to keep you alive just enough to function, to conform, to serve their systems, while slowly eroding your ability to ever fully see your worth. They didn't want you free, they wanted you fractured, because a chosen one who is whole is a revolution in human form. John 10:10 exposes this plan clearly. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I came that they may have life and have it abundantly. You were designed for abundance, but from the beginning, you were placed in an environment that normalized emotional theft. They didn't want to steal your life. They wanted to steal your perception of it, because if they could program your mind to believe you were broken, they wouldn't need to use chains. You would cage yourself. But ask yourself now, why did it start before you even knew who you were? Why did they come for your self-worth before you ever had a chance to develop it? Why were the very people who should have protected you often the ones who reinforced your pain? It's because they saw something in you before you did, something powerful, disruptive, ancient and divine, something that couldn't be allowed to grow without being attacked. Look at the story of Joseph in Genesis 37. He was hated by his brothers before he ever spoke of his dreams. They plotted to kill him, not because he was arrogant, but because his vision threatened their comfort. Like you, Joseph was marked early. His suffering wasn't personal, it was part of his path. And what they meant for harm, God used to reposition him for greatness. You weren't cursed, you were marked. And because they couldn't handle what you were destined to become, they tried to make you doubt you'd ever become it. They didn't come with swords, they came with silence when you cried for help. They came with manipulation disguised as parenting, with abandonment framed as tough love, with betrayal dressed as friendship. They buried weapons in your childhood, hoping you'd spend your adulthood fighting shadows. Isaiah 61:3 promises that God will give us beauty for ashes, the oil of joy for mourning, and the garment of praise for the spirit of despair. But first, you had to walk through the fire. They made sure your identity was built on pain, not purpose. They embedded lies like, you're too much, you're not enough, you'll never be safe, into the foundation of your belief system. They didn't need to kill your body, they just needed to control your story. And still, you rose, just like Trevor Noah, born into apartheid South Africa, where his very existence was considered illegal. Raised in chaos and confusion, he didn't just survive, He grew into a global voice of wit, truth, and clarity. Or think of Mary Shelley, who lost her mother at birth, faced multiple losses, and still wrote Frankenstein, a timeless classic birthed from isolation and pain. Or Tupac Shakur, raised in violence and political rebellion, whose poetry and voice pierced generations with raw, unsettling truth. These weren't just survivors, they were disruptors, and so are you. Romans 8:18 reminds us, I consider that our present sufferings are not worth comparing with the glory that will be revealed in us. Every time you revisit those wounds and choose to heal instead of hide, you tear down the old code. Every time you ask why instead of just moving on, you awaken another piece of your power. Because once you see the design behind your suffering, it loses control over your destiny. They didn't plan on your resilience. They didn't plan on you developing spiritual eyes that could see through the fog. They didn't expect that you would stop coping and start remembering. Remembering who you were before the programming, before the shame, before the mask. And that's the plot twist. You're not just healing, you're becoming a living disruption to their illusion. The same wounds they hoped would silence you have now become your compass, pointing you toward your assignment. You no longer see your scars as proof of defeat, but as blueprints of divine strategy. Psalm 147, 3 promises. He heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds. But the healing isn't just for comfort, it's for clarity. You're no longer questioning if you're chosen, you're learning why you were attacked, and with every revelation, their grip weakens. So now what? Will you still believe that what happened to you was random, or will you see it for what it was? A tactical move to delay your awakening. You're not just recovering, you're returning to your frequency, returning to the version of yourself that existed before trauma was handed to you like inheritance, the version they tried to bury under survival, shame, and self-doubt. They wanted you to manage pain, but you're using it as a portal. They wanted you to stay asleep, but you're seeing too clearly now. They wanted you to conform, but you're about to lead. So yes, they hit you early, but they didn't break you. They activated you. And that's why they're afraid now. Because a chosen one who has made peace with their pain is a chosen one who can no longer be manipulated. The system was never scared of your suffering. It was scared of what would happen when you stopped seeing it as your identity. And now you're turning every wound into a weapon, every scar into a signal, every trauma into transformation. The pain didn't destroy you, it built you. And now you're becoming the version of yourself they never wanted to meet. And that is why it's game over. Number 6, they copied your style, but they could never touch your frequency. Chosen one, have you ever noticed how the very ones who once dismissed you now echo your essence? Isn't it strange how those who once rolled their eyes at your fire now wear the same glow you were ridiculed for? But something feels off, doesn't it? Something about their version is always missing, like a song that sounds right but carries no soul. That's because while they might have copied your style, they could never touch your frequency. And frequency, your true divine signature, cannot be faked, cloned, or borrowed. It must be earned. In the beginning, they called you crazy, too intense, too sensitive, too deep. They questioned your moves, mocked your words, and cast doubt on your very presence. But what they didn't understand was that your energy wasn't a performance. It was a signal, a call from the divine that could not be explained with logic or mimicry. They didn't understand you, but they felt you. And that's why, after laughing at you, they started copying you. Not because they admired you, but because they recognized that your vibration was doing something they couldn't replicate. It was breaking the matrix they were still trapped inside. 1 Samuel 16:7 tells us, "People look at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart." That's the difference. They copied your outer form, but they couldn't access the heart of what made you different. They stole the style, but not the struggle. They wore your aesthetic, but not your anointing. Because you weren't made in public, you were made in silence. You were shaped in shadows. And everything that flows from you now, the presence, the clarity, the disruption, was forged in places they never dared to go. So ask yourself, why is it that your presence shifts rooms even when you say nothing? Why do your words stay with people longer than their own thoughts? Why do those who once belittled you now borrow your language, your energy, your flow? It's not because they've changed. It's because your light revealed something in them they couldn't ignore. But rather than do the inner work, they chose the easier path, imitation. The problem is, imitation can replicate form, but never frequency. Think about Prince, the revolutionary artist who defied every box society tried to put him in. They called him strange, flamboyant, unmarketable. But years later, the very style they rejected became the blueprint of modern music and fashion. His vibration was ahead of its time. Or consider Nina Simone, whose raw truth and spiritual fire were once considered too radical for the mainstream. She didn't perform for applause. She invoked presence. She wasn't looking to be liked. She was here to awaken. Or Jean-Michel Basquiat, the self-taught artist whose graffiti became fine art, but only after the world spent years dismissing his genius. These were not influencers. They were originators, like you. Romans 12:2 reminds us, "Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." That's what makes your essence different. You didn't follow the trend, you broke away from it. While others studied the culture, you listened inward. While they performed for attention, you were transforming in silence. They didn't witness the nights you cried yourself to sleep, wondering why you couldn't fit in. They didn't see the loneliness that shaped your insight. They didn't carry the trauma that tuned your intuition to a frequency most people aren't ready for. That's why their imitation feels hollow, because it is. They want your glow, but not your grind. Your presence, but not your pain. Your wisdom, but not your wilderness. Have you noticed how imitation always lacks weight? It sounds right, looks right, but doesn't move anything. It doesn't shift the atmosphere. It doesn't awaken anything in the soul, because only alignment can do that. 2 Corinthians 11:14 says, "Even Satan disguises himself as an angel of light." That means imitation can look convincing, but without divine source, it carries no impact. And that's the part they don't understand. You're not just being seen, you're being felt, because your frequency carries a charge that only comes from walking through fire and choosing not to harden. They wonder why, even after copying your moves, their words fall flat. Why their version doesn't spark the ripple effect that follows you. It's because while they were rehearsing, you were remembering. While they were watching, you were walking. While they were trying to sound like truth, you were becoming it. Matthew 5:14 declares, "You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden." That light you carry can't be copied because it wasn't born from attention. It was born from obedience. It came from honoring the signal inside you even when no one else believed in it, even when you were misunderstood, even when you stood alone. And now that it shines, they want the light without the price. But the crown doesn't come without the crushing. And your essence, the one they keep reaching for, was bought with blood. So don't shrink when they start copying. Don't apologize when they take pieces of your truth and try to remix them into something palatable. That's not disrespect, it's confirmation. You are the origin, the one sent to disrupt the script. You didn't come here to be accepted. You came to be remembered. You were never meant to blend in. You were never built to be digestible. You weren't sent to the earth to be liked. You were sent to wake it up. And yes, that will come with imitation. But don't let the echo make you question the voice. Imitation only happens when authenticity proves impossible to ignore. You're not being copied because you're trendy. You're being copied because your signal broke through. Isaiah 61 proclaims, "Arise, shine, for your light has come, and the glory of the Lord rises upon you." That rising didn't happen overnight. It took years of silence, years of being the outcast, years of doubting yourself while carrying truths you couldn't explain. But now it's here. Your rise has begun, and their imitation only confirms that your signal is finally being felt across dimensions they never thought you'd reach. So let them try. Let them mimic your walk, your words, your energy. Let them paint in your colors and speak in your rhythm. But never forget, you were the first sound. You cracked the code. And even if they copy every move, they'll never carry the storm you survived to become this version of you. Because style can be copied, frequency must be earned. And yours, it was earned in blood, fire, silence, and grace. So the next time you see your reflection in their repetition, smile. Not from pride, but from peace. Because what they're trying to recreate is proof that you were never just one of many. You were always the one, the original, the blueprint, the vibration that cannot be touched. Number 7. You thought you were cursed, but you were being protected. Chosen one, how many times have you stood in the middle of your life, looking at the pieces on the ground, and whispered to yourself, "What's wrong with me?" How many nights did you cry over doors that wouldn't open? People who disappeared without reason, or moments that slipped through your hands just as you reached for them. You looked at your life and assumed you were cursed, that something was off in the universe's design, that you were forgotten, overlooked, or punished. But what if the truth is far more powerful? What if you were never cursed? You were being protected. You see, the things that didn't happen for you weren't happening to you. They were happening for you. That rejection wasn't cruelty. It was alignment. That door that slammed in your face wasn't a wall. It was a shield. That person who ghosted you wasn't sent to break you. They were removed to preserve you. The universe saw what you couldn't. And because you are chosen, your path had to be guarded. Not casually, not loosely, but like sacred ground. Because when your energy is rare, heaven doesn't gamble with it. It protects it with force. Isaiah 55:8-9 speaks to this truth. "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts." What felt like abandonment was actually divine strategy. You weren't being denied, you were being redirected. And what was withheld from you wasn't punishment, it was preservation. Let's be honest though, it didn't feel like protection, did it? It felt like punishment. You watched others succeed effortlessly while you were stuck in delay. You saw people rise with no depth, no integrity, and no real struggle, while you wrestled in silence just to stay aligned. And in that confusion, you whispered the question no one else could hear. Why does everything collapse when I finally start to believe? But, chosen one, here's what you didn't see. The universe was filtering your life, not to hurt you, but to spare you. You thought you were cursed because the relationship ended, but the truth is, it would have crushed you in the long run. That person wasn't built to hold the weight of your truth. They couldn't handle your intensity. Your clarity would have become a threat to their comfort. And so the universe intervened, not to destroy your heart, but to spare your soul. Proverbs 19:21 says, "Many are the plans in a person's heart, but it is the Lord's purpose that prevails." You may have had dreams that seemed perfect in your eyes, but the purpose placed on your life required a different road, one that doesn't settle, one that doesn't negotiate with misalignment. Think of Stephen King, the world-renowned author whose first novel, Carrie, was rejected by over 30 publishers. At one point, he threw the manuscript in the trash, but his wife pulled it back out, and that novel would go on to launch his entire career. The rejection wasn't a curse, it was timing. Or look at Lady Gaga, who was dropped from her first record label just months before rising to international fame. That delay wasn't an insult. It was protection from an environment that couldn't contain her artistry. Or consider Howard Schultz, the visionary behind Starbucks, who was turned down 217 times before securing funding. The no's weren't blocks, they were filters. Each of these individuals, like you, were being protected from something that looked good but wasn't aligned. You thought you were cursed because you kept losing opportunities, but those opportunities would have caged your creativity. You thought you were cursed because the perfect job fell apart, but that job would have numbed your spirit and pulled you off your divine path. You thought you were cursed because the deal didn't go through, but that deal was too small for the magnitude of your calling. The world saw the glitter, but heaven saw the limits. And so, what felt like collapse was actually rescue. Romans 8:28 declares, "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose." That means even the breakdown was working, even the silence had strategy, even the heartbreak was holy. Because your purpose is not accidental, it's architected. And anything that tries to pull you out of alignment with that purpose becomes a target for divine interruption. And now, when you look back with spiritual eyes, doesn't it all make more sense? The people who walked away just before you needed them most, weren't they the ones who couldn't be trusted with your rise? The friendships that ended suddenly, weren't they already crumbling under the weight of your growth? The moments you thought you failed, weren't they setting you up for something that would have never found you if you stayed where you were? Psalm 37:23-24 gives this assurance. The Lord makes firm the steps of the one who delights in him. Though he may stumble, he will not fall, for the Lord upholds him with his hand. You didn't fall. You were redirected. You weren't cursed. You were cradled by divine wisdom that refused to let you settle for anything less than alignment. Chosen one, the truth is this: the universe doesn't pamper the chosen, it prepares them. And preparation often feels like pain. It strips you, it isolates you, it delays you, but it also refines you. Because your rise isn't built for comfort, it's built for impact. And impact requires focus. It requires detachment from what looks good so you can receive what's meant. Your destiny isn't designed for convenience. It's designed to shift atmospheres. And so, the universe moved with force to protect what you didn't yet understand. You see, if you had gotten everything you wanted when you wanted it, you would have settled for a timeline too small for your soul. You would have attached yourself to people who couldn't carry you through the next dimension. You would have chosen safety over sovereignty. And that's not the way of the chosen. You weren't built to blend in. You were built to disrupt. So the universe didn't let you settle. It didn't let you attach to just anything. It pulled you away, broke your plans, closed the doors, and forced you to trust the process, not to harm you, but to awaken you. So, stop mourning what didn't work out. Stop blaming yourself for what left. Stop wondering if you were ever enough. You were more than enough. That's why the universe couldn't allow just anything to stick to you. Everything that didn't happen was a protection order wrapped in pain. And the more you begin to see that, the more power you reclaim from the narrative of being cursed. 2 Corinthians 4:17 assures us, "For our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all." What left you wasn't your punishment, it was the path to your preparation. What delayed you wasn't divine neglect, it was divine investment. And now, every time you rise, every time you choose clarity over chaos, alignment over desperation, truth over illusion, you are proving that the protection worked. You are here, you are awake, you are aligned, and nothing was lost. It was all rearranged for your rise, because chosen ones don't get what's common, they get what's divinely timed. Number 8. Your mind wasn't broken, it was under attack. Chosen one, have you ever wondered why your mind always felt like the battlefield? Why the storm always seemed louder on the inside than the outside? Why, no matter how many victories you achieved in the physical world, it still felt like you were losing somewhere deep inside your head? That wasn't weakness. That wasn't failure. That wasn't dysfunction. It was warfare. And the war was never truly about your possessions, your platform, your relationships, or even your talents. The real war, since day one, has been for your perception. They didn't need to chain your body, chosen one. They just needed to infect your beliefs. And they did it slowly, methodically, one lie at a time. Not with bullets, but with beliefs. Whispered into your consciousness, embedded through repetition, and reinforced by trauma, disappointment, and misaligned environments. The lie wasn't loud, it was subtle. That's what made it powerful. You began to hear thoughts like, I'm not good enough, I'm broken, I'll never make it, no one truly cares. And somewhere along the way you started believing them, not because they were true, but because they were familiar. John 8:44 reveals the strategy. He was a murderer from the beginning, not holding to the truth, for he is a liar and the father of lies. That's the weapon the enemy used against you, not destruction, but deception. They knew if they could hijack your mind, they wouldn't have to steal your crown. You'd take it off yourself. And for a moment, maybe you did. You thought the thoughts were your own, but what if they were planted? What if they were coded into your environment, modeled by broken people, reinforced by subtle rejections, and repeated by a culture that doesn't benefit from your clarity? Think about it. School taught you obedience, not sovereignty. Media taught you consumption, not wisdom. Culture taught you comparison, not purpose. And every system around you, from education to entertainment, was designed not to enlighten, but to exhaust. But here's the question: who benefits from you thinking small? Who gains when you second-guess every move? Who is empowered when you believe that your dreams are too big, your heart too soft, your vision too strange? It's not you, because once a chosen one wakes up, once they remember who they are, everything the system built begins to unravel. That's why they didn't try to stop you physically. They went for the only place that truly matters: your perception. Romans 12, 2 commands. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. That transformation doesn't happen through external success. It happens through inner clarity. And that's why the greatest battles you've ever fought were the ones no one else could see. They were waged in silence, in your thoughts, in the moments when your soul was screaming and your mouth stayed quiet, in the hours when you couldn't tell what was real and what was programming. But something in you started shifting, didn't it? You began to ask deeper questions. You started noticing patterns. You caught yourself mid-thought and wondered, whose voice is that? And though it's messy, though it's uncomfortable, though it's far from linear, you're waking up. The fog is lifting, the code is breaking, and every time you say no to a thought that once ruled you, you reclaim another piece of your mind. Let's look at real lives that mirrored this journey. Kanye West, though controversial, has openly spoken about his battle with mental attacks and spiritual warfare, often pointing out how the industry tried to mold him, and how breaking free cost him everything but gave him back his voice. Marilyn Monroe, a symbol of beauty and fame, was manipulated, controlled, and psychologically broken by systems that exploited her light. But even in her darkest moments, she knew she was more than what they saw. And Robin Williams, the legendary comedian who made the world laugh, battled unseen demons in his own mind, often speaking of the intense pressure to perform while feeling isolated inside. Each of them reflected the truth. The mind is where the real war is fought, and where it's either won or lost. Chosen one, this wasn't about breaking you. It was about making you believe you were already broken. That's how they kept you distracted. You didn't need bars if you became your own jailer. You didn't need enemies if your own mind whispered self-sabotage. But now, that's changing. You're catching on. The false thoughts are losing their grip, and the real you, the whole you, is surfacing beneath the noise. 2 Corinthians 10:5 teaches, "We demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God, and we take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ." That's what you're doing now. You're not just thinking differently, you're reclaiming territory. You're taking your thoughts captive. You're sorting the truth from the trauma, the facts from the fear, the divine signal from the distortion. And the shift is happening. Slowly, steadily. The things you used to chase, they no longer move you. The things that once triggered you, you now see through them. The voices that once ruled your emotions, you recognize them for what they are, programs, not prophecy. And in that stillness, you're starting to remember something sacred. You were never broken. You were targeted. But underneath the layers, the loops, the lies, you've always been whole. Philippians 4:8 offers this new filter. Whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, think about such things. That's your new language, your new lens, because now you know the truth. Your mind is not the enemy. Your mind is the gateway, and when cleared of distortion, it becomes the compass for your divine assignment. So here's the truth they never wanted you to know. Your mind wasn't weak. It was valuable. That's why they attacked it. That's why they flooded it with noise. That's why they programmed it with doubt. But their attack only proves how powerful your clarity truly is. Because once a chosen one begins to see clearly, the entire system starts to shake. You're not just healing, you're rebooting. The viruses are being deleted. The confusion is evaporating. The fear is fading. And what's emerging is something unshakable. A mind aligned with purpose, undistracted by illusion, and unwilling to be manipulated by false narratives ever again. You were never too broken to rise. You were just too powerful to be left alone. And now that your clarity is returning, so is your fire. And that is what terrifies them most. Chosen one, you were never lost. You were targeted. And now, you're back online. Now, you finally see it. Every so-called setback, every twisted distraction, every carefully crafted lie planted in your mind. It was never random. It was war. And you survived it. You're still here, still breathing, still rising, still remembering who you were before the world told you to forget. The illusion is crumbling, not because it's weak, but because you are no longer holding it up. And that leads us to this final sacred step. Own it. Step boldly, fully, unapologetically into the power they feared from the very beginning. The same power they tried to water down, distort, and delay. You are no longer the hidden one. You are the revealed one, the remembered one, the awakened one. If this journey spoke to you, moved you, helped you remember something eternal within yourself, thank you for walking it with me. Your presence, your time, your energy, it means more than I can say. If you feel led to support this message through a super thanks, know that it helps sustain this work, this mission, this light. But please know this with your whole heart. Whether you donate or not, your presence here, is already a gift. And I'm so deeply grateful for you. And so, from the depths of my spirit to yours, I leave you with this blessing. May your clarity increase. May your path remain guarded. May your frequency remain untouchable. And may every room you walk into be changed, simply because you remembered who you are. You were never average. You were never random. You were always chosen. And now, you're finally becoming everything they never wanted to face. Keep going. We see you. We need you. And heaven walks with you.